everyone, and welcome to another edition of the MAPS Canada Research Room, which is a monthly webinar series dedicated to showcasing research across diverse disciplines within the burgeoning field of psychedelic studies in Canada. Our mission is to democratize access to psychedelic science and foster inclusivity through knowledge translation and dissemination of academic knowledge in a more accessible manner. Each research room session is about an hour long and provides researchers a platform through which they can dynamically engage with the audience about their current research. So I will gladly introduce our speaker for today's session, Dr. David Kryszajtys, who is a Post-Doctoral Fellow at the MAP Center for Urban Health Studies, Unity Health Toronto, with a PhD in Public Health Sciences from the University of Toronto. He studies how social and psychological factors, such as personal experiences with healthcare and cultural attitudes, compel people to make certain decisions about their health and use of healthcare. His research reveals important considerations for improving policies and practices that enhance individual well-being and overall public health, particularly in mental health, addiction, and substance use. Alongside his research on psychedelic self-treatment for depression and anxiety, Dr. Kryszajtys has evaluated harm reduction programs to better support people who use substances. His work has been published in leading journals and presented at conferences worldwide. Today, he will be presenting how people in online communities decide to use psychedelics to self-treat depression and anxiety. He will explore the driving reasons behind their choices, the challenges they face, and how they manage these to reduce harm and maximize benefits, and what complicates their decisions. Dr. Kryszajtys also highlights how online communities promote shared values like respect for psychedelics to help members improve their self-treatment practices and as a communal effort to shift public perception about the responsible use of psychedelics. So welcome, David, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Alkione. Hi, everybody, and thank you for being here today. Just want to thank MAPS for hosting and Alkione for organizing the talk. Really appreciate the interest in this topic. So thank you for the introduction. So today I'll be presenting my findings, and this comes from my dissertation research. It's about, as Alkione said, people's decision-making around psychedelic self-treatment for depression and anxiety, based on online community discussions. And this work, it includes 3 papers, one that's published and 2 more that are going to be published soon. My goal is to give you a high-level overview of the research and show how it all connects together, rather than going into the details. And to fit the presentation within our time, I'm not going to detail all of the methodological aspects, but I'll be happy to answer your more specific questions afterwards if you have any. So before we start, I just want to acknowledge and thank my dissertation committee and co-authors, Dr. Jackie Bender, Carol Strike, and Brian Rush. So as many people here probably know, people are self-treating depression and anxiety with serotonergic psychedelics like psilocybin and LSD, often as alternatives or supplements to standard mental health treatments like therapy and antidepressants. This practice has become popular in recent years, but mental health outcomes are less consistent than with psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, or PAP, where trained professionals administer psychedelics in controlled settings alongside psychotherapy sessions. And the inconsistency may be because many decisions around how psychedelics are used, including choices around the dose people use, the substance, the set and setting, can contribute to the mental health outcomes. In PAP, evidence-based protocols inform how psychedelics are used, including choices around the dose and substance set and setting. And there are resources available to support the implementation, which is thought to improve safety and mental health outcomes. In self-treatment, people may use online communities to inform their decisions, and these communities are known to facilitate the sharing of experiences with substance use and mental health, and advice about how to navigate these health issues. However, there's limited research on decision-making for psychedelic self-treatment in online communities or otherwise, and understanding these experiences may reveal the support that people need for decision-making to improve their outcomes and reduce harm. So we investigated online community members' decision-making process around psychedelic self-treatment and the significant psychosocial factors that influence it. So for this study, we used constructivist grounded theory. It's a qualitative approach for collecting and analyzing data to generate theory about how a group of people think, feel, and act in relation to a specific topic. Our research drew on discussions from two online communities, one about general substance use and the other focused on microdosing psychedelics specifically. And we collected all the discussion threads from these OCs related to depression, anxiety, and psychedelics across a 4-month period in 2020. Using a 2-level selection process, we narrowed down the data set to relevant discussions that were focused on our objectives. First, we screened the threads and included any mentioning self-treatment of depression and anxiety with psychedelics. Then we used theoretical sampling, a constructivist grounded theory technique, to further focus the data selection and analysis on key patterns that emerged. This involves selecting and analyzing new data to answer important questions for each paper until no new insights emerged. The first paper examined decision-making in psychedelic self-treatment over time. The subsequent papers focused on key factors influencing self-treatment over time that emerged during the analysis. And this included desperation for relief of mental health issues and a shared value system in the online communities. So to code the data, we used the constructivist grounded theory process for this and identified key themes and patterns, then used visual maps of the core concepts to better understand how they were related to each other. Throughout the process, we ensured the findings were thorough and reliable by following best practices for constructivist grounded theory, including writing reflective notes about how the data selection and analysis process occurred, purposefully selecting data that challenged our emerging findings, and constantly comparing new insights with earlier insights. So the first paper, published in 2023, examined how online community members' decision-making process for psychedelic self-treatment progressed. 4 distinct decision-making stages were identified. The first stage involved identifying an unmet need for treatment. So as M86 post here shows, members discussed how standard treatments such as exercise, therapy, and antidepressants often fell short of meeting their specific needs. This dissatisfaction helped them identify the attributes of their unmet need for mental health treatment. And as M86 post shows here, this often include things like needing to improve their energy levels or something that was more affordable to them. Identifying this need helped guide their search for alternative options in the next stages. In stage 2, M49's post shows how members began considering self-treatment options for psychedelics. They realized psychedelics' potential for their specific unmet needs, and they wanted to learn more about how it could help them. The research often led to increased uncertainties about which options to use, as they learned that there were many decisions like what dose they should use, microdosing, macrodosing, the setting they should use it in, all of these decisions that could influence whether psychedelics would worsen or improve their mental health. After much research, many of them decided to take the plunge and try psychedelics without being sure of their decision, often because there was not full information available in online communities or elsewhere about how to best do this. And they realized trial and error was necessary to find the best approach. In stage 3, members tried psychedelic self-treatment options. So M41's post here shows how they often began with low-risk protocols, things like microdosing, that were known in the community, and fine-tuned elements like dose, reinventing these protocols as they experimented to better address their specific needs. This experimentation often involved revisiting the earlier stages to then try a slightly different option until they found something that was suitable for their specific needs. In stage 4, members continued or discontinued self-treating with psychedelics, like M03 shows those who continued committed to self-treatment, but also often continued experimenting to maximize advantages or address changes to how they understood their mental health needs and reactions to psychedelic effects over time, which could change in different ways. Others paused or discontinued due to no longer needing treatment or concerns such as adverse effects and a lack of information about long-term effects. So to move through these stages, members sought information from various sources to evaluate advantages and disadvantages of various options for their unmet needs. As M39's post here shows, many avoided information sources who they previously thought of having authority over their health decisions, such as parents, doctors, even government information sources, due to social and legal concerns surrounding psychedelics and being unable to sometimes trust those sources because of the history with psychedelics, as well as the expectation that these sources would not approve of their interests. So there's a stigma there too. M62 post shows that scientific sources often validated psychedelics potential for mental health, but members struggled to apply insights from the scientific research, which often was based on psychedelic-assisted therapy to their self-treatment decisions. And this was because of how the research often involved using psychedelics in controlled medical settings, not resembling their own settings. M78's post highlights how many preferred learning from other people's experiences, often in the community that were shared, which they could relate to their own personal contexts. However, as M22's post illustrates, most prioritize their personal experiences with how psychedelics actually, like how they observe psychedelics to address their unmet needs over other information sources. So that was paper 1. In paper 2, we focused on some members who initially avoided psychedelic self-treatment due to health, social, and legal concerns. But they then later considered psychedelics in a state of desperation for relief from their depression and anxiety. So we noticed they followed the decision-making stages from paper 1, which validated the stages of that model, but they followed these stages in a different way. So we examined how they experienced the development of this desperate need and how it influenced their decision-making for psychedelic self-treatment. So instead of psychedelics, these members attempted many standard treatments, which they found more acceptable from a personal, social, and legal standpoint. M15 and M86 post here highlights how, as they tried these options, they experienced a vicious cycle of mounting frustration because they found that these options weren't able to address their unmet needs. And it led to a worsening state of depression and anxiety over time, which created problems in their lives, which further worsened their mental health and created more problems. Thus, the vicious cycle. Oftentimes, they exhausted all the conventional or standard treatment options that were presented to them by their doctors and so on. Eventually, they described frustration mounting to a tipping point of desperation for relief. So M43 post shows that the tipping point involved moving into stage 1 of the psychedelic self-treatment decision-making process with a desperate need requiring drastic action. M32's post further illustrates how this allowed them to consider psychedelics despite all the previous concerns that they had. Social, legal, and health-related concerns deterring them previously no longer mattered as they perceived no more standard treatment options left to try and issues were only worsening. So they quickly moved from identifying their desperate need in stage 1 to considering psychedelic self-treatment options in stage 2. We found that desperation drove these members to progress quickly through the stages due to reduced information seeking and evaluation compared to the other members we looked at in paper 1, who spent a lot of time researching and evaluating their options. When they entered stage 2, members like M28 cared little to seek new information about their options, and they viewed any option for psychedelic self-treatment with some potential as worth trying even if risky. M102's post further illustrates how, if they already had psychedelics in their possession, they often expressed willingness to try them immediately, or if an opportunity was presented, they would say things like, fuck it, and then use psychedelics, whatever option was presented to them. And this meant that they moved quickly from stage 2 to stage 3, rather than researching and deciding on a more optimal way to address their unmet need. Such decisions often included risk factors for adverse effects, such as not measuring their doses, or even combining substances, like if they were drinking and they're presented with an option, they would use psychedelics. In the third paper, we examined how a shared value across the online communities shaped members' decision-making process with psychedelic self-treatment. So we asked, what is the primary shared value guiding online community members' decision-making? Why and how is it reinforced in the community? And how does it shape their decisions? So we found this shared value around respect for using psychedelics that was very prominent across the discussions. M322's post shows that respect emphasizes acknowledging the powerful psychoactive effects of psychedelics, which could significantly improve or worsen mental health depending on how you use them. So this required approaching self-treatment with a deep understanding of psychedelics and their effects, often involving research and a commitment to cautious use to leverage their power safely and effectively. Across discussions, the several guiding principles that were associated with respect for psychedelics included these ones here. The first one being recognition, which included recognizing that psychedelics are tools for self-reflection on mental health issues, and not things like intoxicants for fun or as cure-alls. This was part of their value system. So reflection emphasized setting clear intentions for safe therapeutic use and integrating insights from psychedelic experiences into daily life. Responsibility stressed that individuals should do their own research and make cautious self-treatment choices based on what they know about their personal susceptibilities and research to adverse psychedelic effects. And lastly, restraint involved resisting the urge to increase dose or frequency for greater benefits, which they thought could compromise sustainable results. So we found that veteran members in the community, those who are experienced with psychedelic self-treatment and often influential voices in the community, reinforced respect and its principles to novices in their posts. Regarding why they did this, some veteran members' posts, like M1195's here, shows a belief that legal constraints to therapeutic access arose from individuals not respecting psychedelics, implying that the reinforcement of respect was meant to reverse these constraints. Similarly, M327 believed that encouraging responsible use through respect would change public perceptions by demonstrating that psychedelics could be safely mastered by many individuals for self-treatment purposes. So many members like M1805 didn't state a motive, but reinforced respect in their discussions by offering informational and emotional support to novices based on this value system. Others like M174 reinforced respect by counteracting conflicting values that were expressed in the community, for example, debating or dismissing views that were trivializing psychedelics. Some reinforced respect by blaming members for the harms they experienced, attributing these harms to not respecting psychedelics. The reinforcement of respect may have influenced some novices' decision-making around psychedelics, as M1131's post shows here. Expressing intentions to respect psychedelics sometimes followed other people's advice to do so. There are fewer direct examples that suggest that members adopted respect in response to advice. However, many like M1141, who sought advice at the start of the 4-month period of discussions and received replies that had promoted respect, started to embed and share this value in their own advice to other members over time. Overall, many members like M1483 expressed increased confidence in using psychedelics safely and effectively due to the community's shared values around respect. Posts suggest that respect provided many members who described difficulty finding support outside of the online communities with a vital framework for navigating uncertainties around psychedelic self-treatment. Just a summary of all the papers again. In the first one, we identified a 4-stage decision-making model for psychedelic self-treatment, where decisions were made by seeking information to evaluate options against evolving unmet needs. Members relied more on personal and peer experiences than other information sources. In the second paper, some members self-treated with psychedelics out of desperation after a tipping point of mounting frustrations with standard treatments. And their decision-making stages mirrored paper 1, but involved reduced information seeking and evaluation that led to rapid stage progression and riskier choices for some. In paper 3, discussions on psychedelic self-treatment demonstrated a shared value of respect, promoting careful and informed decisions, highlighting how online communities may help to fill the gaps in harm reduction for this practice. Limitations of the research include that it may not represent all experiences with psychedelic self-treatment. Some individuals may be underrepresented in online discussions due to various factors, including the digital divide or unequal internet access across socioeconomic groups. Analyzing pre-existing online discussions also prevented probing members, like you would in an interview, for more details about members' decision-making. The findings may not have captured their views after leaving discussions or details they avoided discussing due to the social norms in the online communities. A strength of analyzing pre-existing online discussions, however, is potentially improved access to hard-to-reach populations and views on stigmatized topics that people may be more comfortable discussing anonymously online than directly with researchers. Moreover, we selected 2 online communities with different focuses on substance use and online communities with varied characteristics and experiences, meaning the transferability across these differences. So research with additional data sources can help to triangulate the findings and assess how transferable they are to different settings, individuals, and situations that may not be represented in the online communities we selected. The research makes several contributions. So each paper is the first to contribute plausible explanations for how different psychosocial factors like unmet treatment needs and online communities shape psychedelic self-treatment decisions, offering an improved understanding of how people navigate self-treatment and the wide variation in decisions and outcomes reported in prior research. Implications include a need for more accessible evidence-based support for psychedelic self-treatment to minimize harm and maximize benefits, while online communities facilitate the exchange of support and may improve harm reduction in some ways. Their collective knowledge relies on individuals risking harm by experimenting with self-treatment. The findings, which enhance understanding of people's decision-making process, provide a foundation for knowledge translation, public health initiatives, and additional research more closely aligned with the lived experiences and needs of these communities and the people who engage in this practice. So thank you, everyone. Just an acknowledgement to the online community members that are part of this research, the supervisory committee, family, friends, and mentors. And also this research was funded by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. That was excellent. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I can read them out loud for David to reply to. Just going to leave a few minutes for people to ask their questions. Yeah, you can also put up your hand or unmute yourself if you would like and ask your question directly to David.
I have a couple of questions. One of them is just around, I think this is really interesting research using those online communities. That was really, really interesting. And you got some really great data from that. So that's wonderful and exciting. I'm wondering, to do that kind of research, what like the ethical, like ethics, research ethics boards, requirements are.
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, it has to do with question Ruby asked in the chat about who the two online communities referred to are. So the ethical considerations for this research in general are complicated because there's debates in the research about whether online community data that's available to the public requires ethical approval to do research on, and whether people give their consent because it's public. And from a public health perspective, the goal is always to ensure that you're not causing harm to the participants. So the assumption for this research is that people don't necessarily consent to give their information. So the process that we went through with this was to contact the online communities, contact the moderators, talk to them and ask them what their process is for this, what they prefer, and whether they're okay with us doing this research. And we did do a research ethics board application that included this, as well as another part of the study, which was interviews with people. But the way that we approached it was we just asked them what their preferences were. So they preferred, and the research also says for this type of research, like when it's sensitive about mental health or substance use, you should take caution and ensure that the information can't be found easily. So for instance, like quotes, I have to take away identifying information that can help people like theoretically search Google to find the post and identify the person posting it, reveal their identity. Another thing that they wanted was to not have the name of the online communities included in the research. So to compensate for that, we did things like explain the environment and the differences between these communities. And I think that might answer Ruby's question. And yeah, so I think that's, oh, sorry. Looks like my screen. Still see it doesn't matter. I don't think you need to see the PowerPoint. But yeah, I think that answers the question. And if it doesn't, let me know. I can clarify.
There's been some more questions in the chat. I'm happy to read them. So, is it correct that there were a lot of people who were disappointed by self-psychedelic treatment?
Disappointed? I would say, so we can't say in terms of like a quantitative study can generalize in terms of like if it was a lot of people or not, but we could say was the differences that occurred. So there were people that were disappointed in the results that they got. And often in the second stage of the process, or sorry, the third stage, there was a lot of experimenting. So if they were initially disappointed by the process, a lot of people kept going with it, changing the dose, for instance, or how often they use psychedelics. That was especially true for microdosing. So, they would go with like a protocol that was like 3 days on, 2 days off during the week, and they would change it to 2 days a week or sometimes every day a week. And they would see how it made them feel and they would change their approach. Yeah, and I think that was, so there were definitely different degrees of disappointment. Some people had harmful effects and they would stop using it. Some people kept using, even though there was initial harmful effects. But if you want me to go into detail on any more of those, I can do that as well.
Feel free if you'd like. There's also a second part of this question that says, did you find people who worsened their mental health by self-psychedelic treatment?
Yeah, that was definitely a thing that happened, especially with where I saw it most prominently was with in the second paper, people who are experiencing desperation for relief of their mental health issues, and they were considering psychedelics. In those cases, there were some times where people would make one decision to use psychedelics, without measuring the dose, or they would start maybe with a less risky dose, but then if it didn't work, they would keep feeling that feeling of desperation and increase the dose or redose at the same time. And in those experiences, that often led to cases where the negative effects of psychedelics kept mounting. And yeah, there were some people who would have, say that the negative effects, negative mental health effects affected them for a longer period of time even, and they would stop using. They often use their example, though, as advice to the community to really do their research and be cautious around psychedelics. And they were really spearheading that type of cautious advice afterwards. In terms of, keep answering the questions that I see there. What do you mean by preferences? And what is the preferences there for? You mean like preferences in terms of what kind of psychedelics people preferred, or?
Oh, sorry, that was in relation. You were talking about the online communities and ethics and asking them their preferences.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that was, if I clarified that or not, it was about their preferences around how they would like the data to be cloaked. So like whether they would like their names to be included in the publications of like the title of the online community, the names of the online community members, how they would like identifying data to be included in the quotes or not. So in terms of how many people were desperate, so I could talk to you about the members that were included in that study. There was about 40 who were experiencing desperation that were selected in that study, and we compared those to around 50 members who were not experiencing desperation to kind of compare and see what the differences were in their decision making. There were definitely more people, though, in the community overall, but for this grounded theory approach, you just select data until you finish the theory, essentially, and there are no new insights emerging. Was there any talk about legal access routes? So that's a good question, too. That's something that we've discussed a lot. So at the time, there wasn't as much, the data was collected in 2020. There was some talk about psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, but even in Canada and elsewhere, the legal access routes to that were very few. The special access program for psychedelics that's available now in Canada, I think it started operating a little bit after the data was collected, but I think there was still, even at the start of it, there were that many people that got access to psychedelics through that program. And that's a program that lets people, it's a legal exemption in the law that allows people to request access to psychedelics for use for mental health treatment if they've exhausted other options and it's found suitable for them. Besides that, there was some talk about like informal routes of psychedelic assisted therapy, underground psychedelic assisted therapy, or using things like ayahuasca in different countries. That was part of the conversation, but in terms of legal routes, there weren't many available at that time. In certain situations, some countries, because this was an online community, so it was an international sample. In some countries, for instance, truffles, psilocybin truffles, I think were legal in the Netherlands. And there was one person that talked about how they used that as an alternative to psilocybin, or if they used things like research chemical analogs to psychedelics like 1P-LSD, which is in a kind of legal gray zone, but still technically illegal. But just easier to access. You can order it online easier and so on. So there was those kinds of alternatives that were discussed. Thank you. Was ketamine included as a psychedelic? So in this study, we didn't look at ketamine specifically. We looked at serotonergic psychedelics that work on the 5-HT2A receptors. So like things like psilocybin, LSD, mescaline, and we didn't include ketamine or MDMA. Reason being because there's a slightly different, maybe not slightly, but there's a different pharmacological profile, and there are different risks to navigate there compared to the serotonergic psychedelics. I can go into more detail about that too. Thank you for the question. Well, looks like we got most of the questions. Anybody else interested? So how many participants from Canada and other countries, other demographics? So this was a process for this study. We did collect demographics that were available or self-disclosed by members in their posts. And that just involved going through their post and taking any information they self-disclosed. But we narrowed that down, focused that down to only certain demographics. The country was not included in that, but we got gender, age, the type of psychedelics they used, that they were interested in, and what their mental health issues were. So the sampling process for grounded theory involves getting a diverse of a sample as possible in terms of various demographics, so that the findings that you collect and the theory that you construct has applicability across those differences. And that's another type of generalizability. It's not statistical generalizability, it's theoretical generalizability, where if you see a pattern that's relevant across these differences, it means that it's more likely to apply to these different contexts. So in terms of the demographics, it was just trying to get as many different age groups as possible, as many different genders, many different mental health issues, and different types of interests in psychedelics. The paper that was shared, I think, has characteristics of the participants. So like the specific numbers are there as well, if you want to see that. Thank you so much, appreciate it. Great questions.
Thank you very much, David. Just for everyone, the presentation is going to be available online on our website in the next week or so, maybe 2 weeks. So thank you very much, David, again. And if there isn't any more questions, we can finish the talk here. Thank you.
Thank you again for setting this up. Really appreciate it. And thank you everybody for joining. Great questions.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.